the internet. I don't want to go into that, but I want to talk about this story because it is from the Sunday Mail Report. I think it's a good feel-good story. It's a good way that we can segue. So Zimbabwe to introduce gold-backed digital currency, okay? So the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe plans to introduce a gold-backed digital currency as legal tender to help stabilize the local currency, Zim dollar. We know in some of these areas, there's a lot of volatility with their native currencies, and it can be very hard on the people that live there. It's hard to purchase things when number goes up and number goes down, and there's a lot of volatility. We see this in crypto, and we still see this with Bitcoin. Anyways, the tokens will be a form of electronic money. I like that they said electronic money. Interesting. Backed by the country's gold reserves, which will be held by the central bank. Bank wants people holding Zim dollars to be able to exchange their money for gold-backed tokens to help them hedge against volatility of the local currency. And last year, one US dollar was worth about 150 Zim. Now it's worth about 1,000. I'm going to give this over to Mr. Will.
Wow, throwing it over to me. I didn't think you'd do that after I just slandered the last report, apparently. This is an interesting... It's an interesting story, I think, mainly because of Zimbabwe's importance within cryptocurrency and its importance within like the history of inflation. It's pretty common to see sort of like a picture of Zimbabwe's money floating around crypto Twitter. Years ago, they went through an episode of Hyperinflation, and that sort of set the tone for a lot of people to be like, hey, this is like still something that happens in history. Like this is still something that occurs for nominal people on the edge of markets. A hyperinflation can't occur. And that's why we need Bitcoin. That's why we need alternative currencies. And the fact that they're still building those things out is impressive. I think this also leads into the CBDC front, right? We're seeing a lot of different countries pushing into that. And it's not just like these G20 or these G7 countries. There's a lot of countries out there that are smaller that are looking into this as well, because it does sort of make sense to be able to control your currency. And oftentimes these smaller countries that are pushed around by the dollar, they're pushed around by bigger currencies, they're actually the ones who are going to be interested in CBDC first and foremost, because they want to have more granular control over their local currency. Jen, I'll throw it over to you.
Yeah, so, okay, when I lived in South Africa, I spoke to a lot of people who lived there who are from Zimbabwe, and there's just like this real lack of trust in the government and fiscal policy there, right? And in Zimbabwe, they've kind of gone back and forth between the US dollar and the Zimbabwean dollar. And I believe I read in the Wall Street Journal earlier this year that it's so bad there that even like business owners are creating their own money. They're like writing down currencies on paper that their customers can then use in exchange for goods at a later date. Given all of this information and the history in Zimbabwe, I'm a little bit skeptical about this. Like, should Zimbabweans be putting their trust in the central banks? Like, maybe I'm missing a piece of the story here.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these countries have failed time and time again with central banks. In the US, like you'd say that arguably the Fed is probably failing right now, or at least failing at its mandate with inflation being so high. So it's always sort of like a scale, right? How do you see central banks doing their job or not doing their job? And as crypto advocates, as four shills on the show, if you can, for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general, then we say that we're against central banks, so we don't trust them. And that's why the CBDC conversation is so interesting, right? Because it's the intersection of two things. One, we like cryptocurrency, and one, we don't like central banks. And maybe it's some sort of like magic money that really ties everything together and allows consumers to have like a more frictionless payment system, and allows banks and central banks to actually impose economic moves that strengthens the economy. I don't personally agree with that. And I think that you'll see some of these CBDC schemes come out that don't really fulfill what their mandate is supposed to be. They're just going to be a different implementation of the same policies that have time and time again failed. Zach, over to you.
Yeah, just zooming out, I mean, I think, the future of money is very sort of contested right now. And you see all these varying experiments with it, whether it's these gold-backed digital dollars, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's CBDCs that are just fiat digitally. I think the future of money conversation just is really fascinating, right? Money is like such an important part of our daily lives in terms of transacting value, growing wealth. Like the fact that these questions still persist into this century are really fascinating, right? These are open questions that places like, honestly, Consensus are looking to figure out what's next, right? We have these different competing visions, right? You have CBDCs, you have these, private cryptocurrencies that exist transnationally, and then you have these countries rolling out some digital alternatives. This one a bit different with the gold-backed aspect, but certainly par for the course as it relates to this growing CBDC conversation that we've been seeing going on in China and in other countries around the world. So yeah, it makes me excited to see stories like this, because again, the future of money is very much up in the air, and I think we're seeing various experiments about what might work for countries around the world. Wendy, I saw your hand. I'm going to toss it your way.
I just think that this is a really interesting way to compromise. A lot of people think that it's Bitcoin or nothing, or cryptocurrency or nothing. But at the end of the day, just because we like these particular technologies and we think that they can improve our quality of life, we still have to convince the people in charge. I mean, and I know that crypto is supposed to be decentralized and we're supposed to kind of do what we want to do, but that's not really the way the world works in the type of environment we're in. So it's going to be a very interesting compromise, I feel like, with a lot of different places and their governments to kind of see what happens. So I feel like this may be a step in the right direction, because with anything, like with blockchain technology, you can track the gold. You can actually make sure that we have X amount that's backing this currency. So I feel like it might be a little bit more of a transparent way to do so. But again, I still don't like the idea of a CBDC, but at the end of the day, what can we do?
Gotta say, Zach.
Yeah, interesting story.
Go ahead.
Do you like that one? Did you like that one? Dude,
I just like the tasteful push for consensus there. It was good.
Yeah, it's a good one. You made me excited for consensus.
The vibe here is immaculate. Like I'm just ready to rock.
Are they going to be putting up a wrestling rink for us, or so we can from the earlier story?
We have a whole stage, guys. We have a whole stage in an hour. The shows are an hour. We can do all sorts of crazy stuff. Get ready. Get ready. All right, that's it. We're going to take a little pause. We're going to scheme about our wrestling match.